I'm here outside what has been the Palestinian Mission in London on a very historic day. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration started the creation of the State of Israel with an important provision that the rights of the Palestinian people and the existing population would be protected. As far back as 1938, it was recognised that this pledge had not been honoured. But today, in 2025, a beginning may be being made to honour that pledge. The decision to recognise the State of Palestine is not without controversy. But today, on this sunny autumn morning, this street in Hammersmith is thronged with people quietly celebrating something that many feel should have happened a long time ago. I'll be talking to a few people to get their reactions on what certainly is an historic day. I'm Charlotte Leslie, and I'm the Director of the Conservative Middle East Council.
Hello, Charlotte. I'm Vincent Fean, former Consul General in Jerusalem between 2010 and 14, and now a trustee of the Britain-Palestine project, which looks back at what Britain did, good and ill, between 1917 and 48, and looks forward to equal rights between Israelis and Palestinians.
So Vincent, could you tell us just a little bit, for listeners who may not be fully acquainted with the history of the region from the Balfour Declaration onwards?
Yes, the Balfour Declaration promised a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine, and it promised that there would be no impact on the local population, the Palestinian population. The first promise was kept, the second was not, and during our time, up until 1948, of the British mandate, what the British government did effectively was to prevent the development of democratic representational institutions for as long as there was an Arab majority. And the departure, the Nakba, the catastrophe, the expulsion of Palestinians from what became Israel began on our watch. It began in 1947, finished in 1948 after we left. And today is a good day. It's recognition of the State of Palestine alongside Israel. That's a key point. Nothing is taken away from the State of Israel that belongs to it, and the recognition is happening on the land that the International Court of Justice has said Israel should vacate. That means Gaza, East Jerusalem, and the rest of the West Bank.
What would you say to those who, understandably after the trauma of the terror attack on October the 7th, say that this is simply rewarding Hamas for murder?
I think that the fact that now 150 countries out of the 193 in the UN are recognizing the State of Palestine says a lot about the rule of law, and Hamas says nothing about the rule of law. Hamas has no future in Gaza, governmentally, politically, militarily, and Hamas must relinquish power in Gaza. Currently, the Israeli army controls 85% of the land of Gaza, and I believe that the grip of Hamas is frankly disappearing. This isn't a victory for terrorism. I believe this is a victory for reason and for the decades-long view of the British and international communities that the two-state solution, with Israel enjoying 78% of the territory of Mandate Palestine and the Palestinians 22%, Gaza, East Jerusalem, rest of the West Bank, is the right answer for Israelis and for Palestinians, both.
Sir Vincent Fean, thank you very much indeed.
That was Alf Dubs, as you know.
This historic day, as we mark the UK's formal recognition of the State of Palestine. To open our program, I welcome all the speakers and His Excellency Dr. Husam Zomlot, Ambassador of the State of Palestine to the United Kingdom.
On behalf of the Palestinian President and people, I'd like to begin by welcoming you all to this very special occasion. We are gathered today in front of the Palestinian Mission to the UK, here in London, to mark a historic moment. In the same capital of the Balfour Declaration, After more than a century of ongoing denial, disposition and erasure, the UK government has finally taken the long overdue step of recognizing the state of Palestine. Very soon, pending some legal work, some bureaucratic work with the minister and the government, this plaque, which reads, the Embassy of the State of Palestine, the Embassy of the State of Palestine. This moment is not only about Palestine. It is also about Britain and the British government's solemn responsibility. It is about ending the denial of the Palestinian people's inalienable right to freedom and self-determination. And it is an acknowledgement of a historic injustice. Ladies and gentlemen, Palestine exists. It has always existed, and it always will.
Can I ask you who you are and where you're from?
So I'm Kit Malthouse, Member of Parliament for North West Hampshire and the chair of the, or parliamentary chair of the Conservative Middle East Council.
Kit, what does this recognition of the state of Palestine mean in practical terms from today?
Well, I think there's broadly two things. First of all, it's obviously the correction of a big historical injustice dating back to the Balfour Declaration, which I think is important for the Palestinians. But frankly, it's also important for the second thing, which is the basis of international law. Right, for years now, the Palestinian Authority and the moderate voices within Palestine society have put enormous faith in the strength of international law and international institutions. Have joined international institutions and asked the rest of us to make them have purchase and to mean something. And unfortunately, for the last 20, 30 years since Oslo, that hasn't happened. And so I think the big thing that will come from today is that the whole basis of the exercise of international law changes. And I hope and believe that that in time will lead to accountability across the region and two nations, but also to peace and justice for Palestinians and Israelis.
What would you say to those who are understandably concerned following the terror attacks by Hamas on October the 7th, that this is simply rewarding Hamas for terrorism?
Well, I'd say it's quite the reverse. Right, actually, this is strengthening moderate Palestinian voices who very often at great personal risk have gone out there advocating for non-violence, for peaceful coexistence, for compromise, and for international law to work. Hamas don't want two states, right? That's not what they want. And while they might be making noises off about this, actually, you have to ask yourself, who does non-recognition reward, right? And non-recognition is so far led us into a never-ending spiral of revenge and violence and horror. And so it's time that we did what we said we would do decades and decades ago, which was try and safeguard the civil rights and human rights of the Palestinian people. And that's the step that's being taken today. It's not the end, it's the beginning. There's a lot of work to do yet, and it won't be easy. But I hope it's a first step for a cessation of violence and a first step towards peaceful coexistence.
Kit Malthouse, thank you very much indeed.
We welcome this decision and acknowledge the gravity of this moment. We must remember that this recognition comes at a time of unimaginable pain and suffering, as a genocide is being waged against us. A genocide that is still being denied and allowed to continue with impunity. It comes as our people in Gaza are being starved, bombed, and buried under the rubble of their homes. As our people in the West Bank are being ethnically cleansed, brutalized by daily state-sponsored terrorism, land theft, and suffocating oppression. It comes as the humanity of the Palestinian people is questioned, our lives still treated as disposable, and our basic freedoms still denied. And yet, this moment stands as a defiant act of truth, a refusal to let genocide be the final word, a refusal to accept that occupation is permanent, a refusal to be erased, and a refusal to be dehumanized. Ladies and gentlemen.
I'm Chris Doyle. I'm the Director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding. I've been working on the issue of recognising a Palestinian state for over 30 years.
Chris, the first thing to ask is many people will say that after the horrendous attack of October the 7th, recognising the state of Palestine is simply rewarding Hamas for terrorism. What would you say to that?
It is an utter nonsense. In fact, to the contrary, it is rewarding the nationalist movement, the Palestinian nationalist movement, who have always sought a two-state solution since 1988. It is rewarding those who agree to the negotiations, who back two independent sovereign states living side by side. That's not the agenda of Hamas. Hamas objects to that. Hamas has never campaigned for that. It's never fought for that. So this is actually rewarding the Palestinian political branch that supports a peaceful, negotiated resolution of this conflict, not one that wants to use violence to bring that about.
So you're saying it's rewarding a Palestinian Authority which has twice recognised the state of Israel and not a political Islamist movement who doesn't?
Absolutely, and it's rewarding above all the Palestinian people themselves, because it's acknowledging their national rights, it's acknowledging their right to self-determination and their aspiration for freedom and justice.
What more does the UK government have to do, and indeed the Palestinian Authority, because there are reforms to be made there, I think, to make a Palestinian state a reality?
Well, first of all, the absolute priority right now is to end the genocide in Gaza, to end all the atrocities, the bombing, the starvation, the famine, and also to end the colossal settlement building project in the West Bank. That's an absolute requirement. This is a state that is being recognised, but a state under occupation still. So that has to end. So there's a lot of work to do to end that suffering, and that really is a priority. In terms of what will be the political character of a Palestinian state, for sure, Palestinians themselves are first in the queue, demanding reforms, demanding a change in how things are run. They're not satisfied. And of course, ultimately, there must be free and fair elections. But that is really a matter for Palestinians to sort out. First of all, we have to end this conflict, end the bloodshed and the suffering, and actually provide the pathway forward for these two peoples to live together.
Finally, the obvious concern people will have is that Hamas ends up running a Palestinian state. What is the Palestinian Authority's policy on Hamas?
Well, that's not entirely clear, but obviously they're rivals. They had a conflict with each other. They don't get on. So they are not in the same ideological, political camp at all, and there is a lot of bad blood between them, very sadly for Palestinians. But right now, Hamas is on its knees militarily. It's been smashed in Gaza, not totally destroyed, but certainly it doesn't really represent a meaningful power in that sense. And I think that the international community, the international actors, are very determined that Hamas will not be the ruling power in Palestine. And that is something the Arab League has signed up to. It's what a lot of other countries. So I think this is also somewhat of a red herring. But the warning here is that if we do not do more steps to back up Palestinian national movement, to demonstrate to Palestinians that actually through negotiation, through talking, through concessions, that you do realize rights to freedom, then people will be attracted to those who say resistance is the path forward because there's no other way. And that is why today's move does matter, because it does indicate, albeit far, far too late, that Britain is prepared to go on that path.
Chris Doyle, thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency, for those powerful words. Now, I'm delighted to welcome His Excellency Minister Hamish Falconer, Minister of State for the Middle East and North Africa, to share his reflection on this historic recognition.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you to everybody for coming. It is such a pleasure to join friends from around the world. It is a pleasure to join friends from around the world. So many members of the diplomatic corps, the Dean, both of the Arab ambassadors, and of course, the whole diplomatic corps. Yesterday, alongside more than 145 nations, in partnership with key allies, the Prime Minister formally recognised the state of Palestine as sovereign and independent. I repeat that message to you today. This is a landmark decision. It reflects the UK's enduring support for the Palestinian people's right to self-determination. Together with our partners, it sends a clear message. Lasting peace and security for Palestinians and Israelis depends on a two-state solution and Palestinian statehood. This is not only an endorsement of the vision of two states, it is a rejection of extremist ideas on both sides, fancies of the destruction of the State of Israel or the expulsion of the Palestinian people. The concept of two states living side by side is at risk of being destroyed by appalling violence and hunger, by the relentless expansion of settlements and attacks in the West Bank. Despite the strongest demands of the UK and many others, the Israeli government has plunged deeper into a war that has claimed tens of thousands of lives and pushed Gaza into famine. This conflict can never be solved by force. The restrictions on aid are indefensible. Children are starving, our aid is piling up. I have seen it myself in warehouses in Al Arish. Hamas continues to hold hostages in appalling conditions, and the suffering of families on all sides continues to be prolonged. These actions do not serve the cause of justice. Let me be clear, recognition is not abandoning our support for Israel. Palestinian statehood can open new relationships, regional cooperation, normalization, and peaceful coexistence. That is impossible, though, while the horrors in Gaza continue, and while even the idea of a Palestinian state is rejected by the Israeli government. So our recognition is not just symbolic. It is a clear statement of intent. It's a statement of principle, and it is alongside the majority of the world, including France, Canada, and Australia. We made our announcement yesterday, as Husam has said, with the hand of history on our shoulder. I know our past in the region. It stretches back to 1917 and beyond. It gives us a special responsibility, both to support Palestinian rights and to support a two-state solution. The Balfour Declaration came with the promise that nothing shall be done, nothing which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of the Palestinian people. That has not been upheld. Yesterday's announcement cements this Labour government's long-standing commitment to the rights of the Palestinian people, to ensuring equal rights and equal esteem between Palestinians and Israelis. I'm proud to reiterate that commitment today and stress that the UK will lend its full support to the Palestinian Authority as it continues to build an effective, reformed and unified state. I look forward to deepening our partnership as we establish diplomatic relations and strengthen cooperation. This is a relationship defined by ties that bind people's mutual interest and a shared vision for a peaceful and prosperous future. I know that this is a moment of suffering for the Palestinians. I know that recognition comes amid great pain and great personal loss. I know that recognition alone will not end the war or remove the indignities of occupation. The Palestinians face this every day: violence, hunger, displacement, crippling financial and movement restrictions. But our wish is that our decision can offer hope, that it can create momentum for real progress, a vital part of a broader push for a just and lasting peace. We need a ceasefire now. We need hostages released. We need Hamas disarmed. We need the barriers lifted so aid can reach those in desperate need. And we need a path to long-term peace. As Minister for the Middle East, I'm determined to keep pushing for a future beyond this crisis, for a future built on peace, security, and hope. Thank you.
I now have the pleasure of introducing the Right Honourable Kit Malthouse MP, Chairman of the Conservative Middle East Council.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, Minister, friends, ladies and gentlemen. As Chair of the Conservative Middle East Council, I obviously welcome wholeheartedly this historic step today. It reflects a growing recognition across our political life that the Palestinian people cannot be left in limbo any longer, that their dignity, their identity, and their right to self-determination must be acknowledged. For too long, Palestine has been denied recognition. The Palestinian people have endured decades of displacement, occupation, and the daily reality of being told their statehood is conditional, their rights uncertain, their future postponed. Recognition today is a small but vital correction of an historic injustice, a statement that Palestinians, like all peoples, are entitled to freedom, sovereignty, and a place in the international community. But this act also sends a vital message that international law and international institutions still matter. For years, they have been neglected, ignored, or dismissed. Too often, they have been applied with double standards, held in one place, disregarded in another. If peace is to be possible, then law must apply consistently, and the rules that govern us all must not be optional. As others have said, recognition sadly alone will not end this conflict. The path ahead remains difficult. Violence, suffering, and mistrust will not disappear overnight. But recognition matters because it says clearly that peace cannot be built on denial. It gives strength to those who believe in negotiation and coexistence, and it signals that Britain will no longer look away from the rightful claims of the Palestinian people. As an opposition MP, I will continue to hold the government to its word that this decision is followed by real action. Action to support institution building, to push for serious negotiations, to stand up for international law without double standards, and to encourage both peoples to live in security and freedom side by side. And finally, first of all, I have to pay tribute to the Ambassador himself, who has quietly, patiently, logically, and with humanity and intelligence made the case consistently throughout our Parliament and our country for recognition and the rights of his people. There could be no greater champion. Congratulations to you. And then finally, to the Palestinian people, you have our respect, our support, and our determination that your right to statehood must be matched with a future of peace. But most of all, we hear you, and we see you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the close of our formal program. Yesterday's recognition is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a new chapter, as Ambassador Husam Zomlot just said, a chapter that must lead to concrete action, ending occupation, halting the ongoing genocide, and ensuring accountability and justice. On behalf of the Palestinian Mission, I thank you all for joining us in commemorating this historic day. Together, we will continue the work towards a free and prosperous state of Palestine. Thank you.